Frank Castle moved through the building like it was already empty. It was not empty. He could hear two men talking in the next room, low voices, laughing. The kind of laugh that came from people who thought rules were for other people. Frank kept his breathing quiet. He held his rifle close. He checked the hall again, then the door, then the floor. The place was a stash house, not a normal one. The walls had too much new paint. The locks were too clean. The cameras were too well hidden. Someone had money. He slid a small mirror under the door. He saw boots, 2 pairs. He saw a table leg, a crate, and something else. A hard case on the table. Black. Medical style. He counted to 3 in his head. He opened the door fast and threw a flashbang in low. The room went white and loud. 2 men screamed. Frank was already inside. He hit the first one with the rifle stock, hard. The man folded. Frank drove the second man into the wall and took his pistol before it cleared the holster. "Hands," Frank said. The man's hands went up, shaking, eyes watering from the light. Frank looked past him at the table. The black case was real. It had a label on it with a logo Frank did not know. It looked like a shiny V with stars. There were vials inside. Not drugs and baggies, not cash, not guns. Vials. Frank did not like vials. The man tried to run. Frank kicked his knee out. The man dropped like a sack and hit the floor. Frank grabbed the case and snapped it open wider. The vials were cold, thick glass, metal caps, some clear, some blue. One that looked almost like liquid silver. There was also a smaller device in the foam, a little box with a screen. The screen was cracked. The box hummed like a live wire. Frank did not touch it with bare skin. He used his glove. The hum grew louder. The cracked screen flickered. Lines of text flashed for half a second, like a foreign language. Then the air changed. It felt like pressure behind his eyes, like the room was suddenly too small. Frank turned toward the door. The hallway bent, not in a magic way, in a wrong way. Like a camera lens had been twisted hard. A thin line opened in the air. It was not bright at first. It was dark, darker than the shadows in the corners. Then it ripped wider. Frank's instincts screamed at him to move. He did. He went for the door and the exit route he had planned. The floor shook. The line became a tear, and the tear became a mouth. The sound was not a boom. It was a deep pull, like all the air was being dragged into one point. Frank dug his boots into the floor. He grabbed the doorframe, his muscles locked, his teeth clenched. The pull got stronger. The case in his hand jerked like it wanted to fly. "Not today," Frank growled and tightened his grip. The wall cracked. The building groaned. And then the world vanished. There was no falling, no sky, no tunnel. Just a hard, bright flash that made his vision go white. When his eyes opened again, he was on his knees on concrete. Sunlight hit his face. Hot. Real. He heard traffic. He heard people. He heard music from somewhere. He smelled street food and exhaust and cheap perfume. Frank blinked and looked up. Tall buildings. A busy street. Glass and steel. And billboards. Not normal billboards. Giant screens, bright enough to hurt your eyes. One showed a man in a cape smiling like a movie star. Another showed a woman in a red, white, blue suit waving. Big words rolled across them like a cheer. America's heroes. Vought presents. Frank's stomach went cold. He stood up slowly. His rifle was still in his hands. The black case was still slung under his arm. People were staring now. A kid lifted a phone and started filming. Frank turned his head and saw his own reflection in a store window. Black gear, hard plates, a skull on his chest, a symbol he wore for one reason only: fear. A scream cut through the street. Frank snapped his head toward it. A man was being dragged out of a small jewelry store. Another man had a pistol. A third had a bag stuffed with watches and chains. The store clerk was on the floor, bleeding from his nose. The robber with the pistol shoved the clerk's head down with his boot. "Stay down!" the robber shouted. "Stay down or—" Frank moved. He did not sprint like a hero. He walked fast, straight, like a soldier crossing a kill zone. His rifle stayed low, not pointed at the crowd. People backed away anyway. The robber saw him and laughed, like it was a joke. "Hey, skull guy, Halloween's—" Frank shot the pistol out of the robber's hand. One clean shot. The pistol spun and clattered across the sidewalk. The robber screamed and grabbed his wrist. The other two froze. Frank closed the distance and hit the first robber in the throat with the edge of his hand. The man dropped, choking. Frank kicked the second robber's knee sideways. The knee bent the wrong way. The man fell hard and howled. The third robber tried to run. Frank grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the wall once, twice, until his legs stopped working. The street went quiet for a beat. Then people started shouting again, but not at the robbers, at Frank. Phones rose everywhere, like a forest of small screens. Someone yelled, "Is that a new soup?" Someone else yelled, "No, look, he's got a gun!" Frank looked down at the clerk. The clerk stared at him like he was the worst thing in the room. "Call an ambulance," Frank said. The clerk didn't move. Frank reached for the clerk's phone on the counter. The screen was on. It showed a camera app, a shaking video of Frank. A face popped up on the screen. A woman, blonde hair, perfect makeup, a news anchor smile. Breaking news: possible terror attack downtown. Frank stared at the phone like it was talking trash to his face. A shadow fell over the street. Frank looked up. A man landed in the middle of the road with a soft thud. Like the ground was proud to hold him. He wore a suit with a cape. He was broad-shouldered and bright, like someone designed him to be loved. People cheered like a concert. The soup smiled at the cameras. "Everyone stay calm," he called out. "Vought's finest is here." He turned to Frank and the smile shifted. Not fear, not respect, annoyance. "Hey," the soup said, voice loud for the cameras. "Put the weapon down. You're making this worse." Frank saw the clerk still bleeding. He saw the robber clutching his shattered wrist. He saw civilians packed tight on the sidewalk. He saw the soup's eyes glance at the cameras first, not the injured. "Back up," Frank said. The soup laughed, like Frank was a kid telling a grown man what to do. Then the soup shoved a civilian aside to get a cleaner angle. The civilian hit the ground hard. Frank's face did not change, but something in his chest snapped into place. He raised his rifle and fired at the soup's shoulder. Not to kill, to stop, to test. The bullet hit and did nothing. The soup looked down at the small dent in his suit, then back up at Frank. His smile returned, sharper. "That was a mistake," the soup said. Frank did not run. He stepped in and slammed the rifle stock into the soup's jaw. The soup's head barely moved. Frank felt the shock travel up his arms. It was like hitting a steel pole. The soup grabbed Frank's rifle with one hand and bent the barrel like it was a toy. Frank released it before it snapped back into his face. People gasped. Some laughed. Cameras zoomed in. Frank's eyes tracked exits, angles, bodies, cover. Like always, the soup raised his hand, ready to hit Frank. And then a new sound filled the air, not a cheer, a low rumble from above. Everyone looked up. A figure floated in the sky, high and still, like he owned the air. Cape, flag colors, perfect hair. Homelander. He did not land. He just watched. Frank felt the crowd shift. People got smaller without meaning to, like animals in the presence of a larger predator. Homelander's eyes scanned the scene. Then they settled on Frank. Frank looked back. Two men, two symbols, Two kinds of violence. Homelander's mouth curved into a slow smile, like he had just found something new to break. On a nearby giant screen, the breaking news banner updated again. A grainy image appeared. Frank's skull. Frank's masked face. New threat in New York? The Skull Man. And under it, in smaller letters, already trending across the bottom of the screen, Lazursier, Skullman. Frank looked at the screen, then at the people filming him. He didn't know this world, but it already knew his symbol, and it had already decided what story to tell. Frank turned and walked into the crowd before anyone could block him. The cameras followed. Homelander stayed in the sky, watching. Huey Campbell did not like crowds. Crowds meant noise, and noise meant mistakes. And mistakes in this job meant body bags. He leaned over a laptop in a cramped room that smelled like old takeout and cheap cleaning spray. The screen showed a dozen clips at once, shaky phone videos, screaming, blurry capes, and one clear image that made Huey's throat tighten. A man in black body armor, a skull on his chest, a rifle in his hands. Huey paused the clip right as the soup bent the rifle barrel like rubber. "Bloody hell," Butcher said behind him. Butcher had his boots up on a chair like he owned the place. He watched the screen like it was a movie he'd already decided he liked. "Is he a soup?" Huey asked. MM stepped closer, arms crossed. His face was tight and tired. "If he is, he's a weird one. Soup with a rifle? Not Vought style." Frenchie clicked his tongue. "It is not normal. It is old school." Kimiko sat on the floor near the wall, quiet as always, eyes fixed on the screen. Her fingers flexed once, like she could feel the fight through the pixels. Annie, Starlight, stood near the doorway. She looked sick, not at the violence, at the cheering. "They're already calling him a terrorist," she said. "Vought is pushing it hard." "They're saying he shot at a hero." Butcher grinned. "He did shoot at a hero. That's the best part." MM shot him a look. "Don't say that like it's funny." Butcher shrugged. "It is funny. Also useful. Someone just walked into this mess and punched a soup on camera. That's not nothing." Huey scrubbed his face. Homelander was there. He replayed the moment, the sky, the hovering man, the way the crowd changed. Annie's eyes went distant. If Homelander noticed him, that's bad. Butcher leaned forward. "Or it's an opportunity." MM said, "No, it's both." Huey looked back at the Skullman's posture in the clips, the way he moved, not like a performer, not like a superhero, like someone trained to kill and live through it. "He didn't talk much," Huey said. "He didn't pose. He didn't look at the cameras. But they looked at him," Annie said quietly. Frenchie tapped the screen where the skull symbol was frozen mid-frame. "That mark, it is a statement." Butcher's smile thinned. "It's a warning." MM's voice stayed calm, but Huey could hear the worry under it. "We need to find him before Vought does." "But why?" Huey asked. "To recruit him?" Butcher pointed at the screen like it was simple math. "To aim him." Annie stepped forward. "He's a person, not a missile." Butcher looked at her like she was being cute. "In this world, love, everyone's a missile. Some just don't know it yet." Huey hated that Butcher sometimes sounded right. MM cut in. "We do this smart. No hero stuff. No lone wolf stuff. We watch first." Butcher smirked. "Listen to Dad." MM glared. "I'll put you through a wall." Kimiko made a small sound, half laugh, half growl. Huey zoomed in on one frame. The Skullman's glove was around a phone on a counter. For a second, Huey could see the man's eyes through the mask. Dark, focused, not scared. Huey felt a chill. That look wasn't reckless. It was decided. Frank did not know what Vought was. He did not know what soups were. He did not know why people cheered for capes like they were sports teams. He only knew what he saw. A man who could not be hurt. A man who shoved a civilian to look good on camera. A sky god smiling down like the street was his stage. Frank stayed off main roads. He moved through service alleys and fire escapes. He watched reflections in windows. He listened for sirens. He found a quiet corner behind a closed diner and opened the black case again. The vials were still inside. Cold. The cracked device still hummed, but weaker now, like it was dying. Frank stared at the Vought logo. He didn't like unknown tech. He didn't like unknown drugs. He didn't like being somewhere he had not planned for. He snapped the case shut. A buzzing sound hit his ear. Frank froze. A phone buzz. He turned his head and saw a man half hidden near a trash bin, watching him. The man held a cheap burner phone like it was a weapon. The man's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. He just showed the phone screen, held out. On it was a map, a dot, and a message in simple text. Don't move, just talk. Frank's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Frank asked. The man swallowed. Name's Huey. I'm not with them. Who's them? Huey's hand shook a little. The capes. Vought. Frank took one step forward. Huey flinched, then held his ground. I'm with some people, Huey said fast. We fight Vought. We're not good at it, but we try. And you just punched one of their heroes. Frank stared at the phone. You tracked me. Huey looked down, like he hated admitting it. Yeah. Frank reached out and took the phone from Huey's hand. Huey went still, eyes wide. Frank stared at the screen. He tapped it once. Nothing happened. He tapped again. The screen changed. Bright icons, notifications, a dozen new messages. Frank's jaw tightened. He turned the phone over, like the answers might be on the back. Huey blinked. You don't use... Frank crushed the phone in his fist. Plastic cracked. Screen shattered. The buzzing died. Huey stared like Frank had just crushed a baby bird. Frank dropped the broken pieces in the trash. Talk, Frank said. Huey swallowed again. Okay, right. You can't stay out here. Vought has cameras everywhere. They'll send people, real people. And soups, Frank said. Let them. Huey's eyes flicked up to the sky, like he expected Homelander to drop out of it at any second. No, you don't get it. They'll send someone you can't fight. Frank stepped closer. Huey could smell gun oil and dust. The Skullman's voice stayed flat. I fight what's in front of me. Huey forced himself to breathe. We have a place. Safe-ish. We can at least tell you what world you're in. Frank's eyes narrowed behind the mask. And what do you want? Huey hesitated. Truth would be safer than lies. Huey knew that. We want Vought to burn, Huey said. And you look like you want the same thing. Frank didn't answer. A siren wailed in the distance. Frank tilted his head, listening. Huey saw it then. This wasn't a man who got lost. This was a man who never stopped scanning. Frank said, Lead. Huey blinked. Wait, really? Frank's voice was cold. Move. Huey moved. Butcher watched the security camera feed from the safe house hallway and smiled like Christmas came early. The Skullman walked in behind Huey like a shadow with boots. Stood near the kitchen with his arms crossed. Annie stood to the side, ready to light up the room if she had to. Frenchie was half hidden behind a doorway, holding a syringe gun he probably made out of a toaster. Kimiko leaned forward, eyes sharp. She did not look afraid. She looked curious. Frank stopped just inside the room. He did not lower his hands. He did not relax. He scanned them all in one sweep. He saw the guns, the exits, The windows, the distance. Stepped forward 1 inch, like he was testing a line. Mask stays on, said. Frank said, "No one touches me." Butcher chuckled. "He's got manners. I like him." Annie shot Butcher a look. Huey tried to sound normal and failed. He broke my phone." Butcher laughed. "Bless him." Frank's head turned slightly toward Butcher. Butcher leaned in, eyes bright. "So, you're not one of ours, are you? Not Vought. Not a cape. Just a bloke in armor with a skull." Frank's voice stayed calm. "Who are you?" Butcher spread his hands. "Billy Butcher. That's Mother's Milk. That's Frenchie. That's Kimiko. And that's Starlight." Frank's eyes paused on Annie, the star on her suit. The way she stood like she wanted to help and hit at the same time. "You're Vought," Frank said to her. Annie's face tightened. "I was. I'm not anymore." Frank looked at Huey. "He trusts you." Huey nodded, small. "Yeah." Frank's gaze went back to Annie. "Then I'll listen." Spoke next. His voice was steady but firm. "We're going to ask you some questions. You show up out of nowhere. You shoot at a hero. Homelander sees you. That makes you a problem for us, too." Frank didn't flinch at the name. Butcher watched him carefully. "You got a name, mate?" Frank paused. The room felt tighter. "Not important," Frank said. Butcher's smile thinned. "See? That's where we disagree." Frank took a slow step forward. Every gun in the room shifted. Even Annie's hands lifted slightly. Frank didn't care. He said, "Tell me what this place is." Frenchie stepped out a bit, palms up. "This is America, yes, but not your America. Here, heroes are made, sold, controlled." Kimiko made a sharp gesture like snapping something in half. Huey tried to explain simply. "There's a company. Vought. They make superheroes with a drug called Compound V. Most people don't know. They think heroes are born." Frank stared at them all. "A company makes monsters," Frank said. Said, "Yeah." Frank's voice turned rough. "And you let them walk around?" Butcher barked a laugh. "We don't let them. We survive them." Annie said, "Some of us try to stop them without becoming them." Frank looked at her again, like he was weighing the words. Nodded toward Frank's chest. "And you? What's your deal?" Frank's answer came in clean beats, like facts on a report. "I find people who hurt the innocent," he said. "I end them." Butcher's grin came back, music to my ears. M's eyes hardened. "No, not music! Not here! You start executing people on the street, we all die! You understand?" Frank's head tilted. "Your world already kills people on the street. It just smiles while it does it." Silence hit the room. Huey felt his stomach sink because Frank was not wrong. Annie swallowed. "You shot at a hero today," Frank said. "He shoved a civilian to get a better camera shot." Annie's face flickered with anger. "That tracks." Butcher leaned back like a king on a broken throne. "So, Skullman, you want to kill Soups?" Frank didn't answer right away. He looked at Huey, then then Annie. Then he said, "If they're guilty." Butcher rolled his eyes. "Oh, look at that. He's got standards." Said, "We do." 2. Frank stepped closer to the table. Someone had set a cheap phone on it, like an offering. Huey said fast, "We got you a burner. In case you..." Frank picked it up. He turned it over. He pressed the side button and the screen lit up. It wanted a passcode. Frank stared at it like it was a lock designed by an idiot. Huey tried not to smile and failed. You just swipe and..." Frank looked at Huey. Huey stopped smiling. Frank handed the phone back. "I don't need it." Butcher laughed again. "He's allergic to technology. Amazing." Frenchie quietly. Or he is just from a different time. Butcher's grin went sharp. Or a different place. Annie's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Butcher pointed at Frank's gear. That armor, that symbol. He's not Vought, but he's not normal either. Leaned forward. Where did you come from? Frank's hands tightened. He did not look away. Not from here, Frank said. Huey's mouth opened. What is that? Frank cut him off. I was in a building. There was a device. It tore the air. Now I'm here. Frenchie's eyes went wide with real fear and real excitement mixed together. A tear. Like space itself. Butcher's smile turned hungry. Well, ain't that special? Annie took a slow breath. If that's true, Vought will never stop hunting you. Frank said. Good. MM's voice got harder. No, not good. Because they'll hunt us too. Frank looked at him. Then stay out of my way. Said, you want to survive here? You don't go alone. Frank's eyes went to Kimiko, then back. I always go alone. Kimiko's lips pulled into something like a grin. She tapped her chest once, then pointed at him. Then pointed at the door, like a simple promise. I can follow. Frank held her gaze. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. Huey felt the room shifting, lines forming. Annie said, we can help you understand this world, and we can help you not get innocent people killed while you do your mission. Frank's voice stayed flat. And what do you get? Butcher answered for everyone. We get a way to hurt them. Frank looked at Butcher like he was looking at a man holding poison and calling it medicine. Then Frank said, information, targets, locations, names. Frowned. That's it? Frank nodded once. That's it? Huey almost believed it. Butcher did too. That was the scary part. A notification pinged on the laptop. Frenchie leaned over it and cursed in French. Annie stepped in and read the headline. Vought announces emergency. Safety operation after terror attack. Below it was a freeze frame of Frank's skull. And another. And another. Different angles. Different clips. Edited fast. Painted in red and black like a horror trailer. Huey's skin crawled. They're making you a villain, Huey said. Frank's voice was quiet. They were going to anyway. Looked at the team. We keep him here. Vought finds us. Butcher said. We let him go. Vought finds him. And then we lose the best distraction we've ever had. Annie snapped. He's not a distraction. Butcher met her eyes. Everything's a distraction. You should know. You were one. Annie's jaw clenched. Sparks flickered in her eyes. Faint, but real. Frank watched them argue like he had watched squads argue in a bad war. The same pattern. The same fear under the anger. Then Frank spoke, and it cut through the noise. Show me your enemy, Frank said. Stared. What? Frank's voice stayed steady. Show me Vought. Butcher smiled again. Now we're talking. Vought Tower looked like it was built to be worshipped. Frank watched it from a distance, from behind the tinted window of a stolen van. It wasn't a military base. It was a shrine. He could see people outside taking pictures like tourists. He could see security moving with smooth confidence. He could see cameras on corners that watched everything. Butcher sat up front, chewing on something and not offering any. Huey sat beside Frank in the back and kept trying to be useful. So, that thing you said, Huey began, about the air tearing, that's not normal, right? Frank didn't answer. Huey tried again. Like, you're not from another state or something. You mean, like another world? Frank's eyes stayed on the tower. I mean, I wasn't here yesterday. Huey nodded slowly. Okay. Fair. Butcher looked in the mirror. Stop poking the bear, Huey. He'll break your other phone. Huey muttered. I don't have another phone. Butcher smirked. That's what makes it funny. Drove, steady, calm, like he was holding the whole team together with his hands on the wheel. Frenchie checked a bag of gear. He whispered to Kimiko like it was a private joke. Kimiko shrugged. Annie sat in the passenger seat, eyes forward, tense. She didn't like being near Vought Tower. Frank could tell. Her shoulders were too tight. Her jaw was set. Frank's eyes moved across the streets, marking exits, alleyways, storm drains, a place to disappear. He saw something else, too. A giant screen on the side of a building, playing a Vought news segment. The anchor's voice was bright and fake. Authorities are warning the public about a new extremist known as the Skull Man. The screen showed Frank's symbol again. It was already too big. Huey watched it and swallowed. That's you. Frank said, "No." Huey blinked. "What?" Frank's voice was cold. "That's their story of me." Butcher chuckled. "Welcome to the show, mate." Frank's hands tightened. He didn't like being turned into a character. He liked being a problem. The trap was almost polite. That's what Frank thought when he saw it. A warehouse near the docks. A call that had come through one of the boys' channels. A tip about a soup trafficking ring. Innocent people inside. Guards with guns. A chance to hit Vought without hitting Vought Tower. It was too clean. Frank stood in the shadow of a shipping container and watched through binoculars. He saw security at the doors. Not normal thugs. These men moved like trained contractors. He saw cameras, new and well-placed. He saw a van nearby with dark windows. Huey whispered, "This is the place." Whispered back, "We don't rush, we watch." Butcher said, very soft, "Or we walk right in and let them show their hand." Annie glared at him. "You want people hurt?" Butcher shrugged. "Vought wants people hurt. I want Vought caught." Frank lowered the binoculars. He could feel the shape of the trap, not the details, the intent. He thought of the clerk on the floor, the civilian shoved aside for a better shot. He thought of the Sky Man's smile. Frank said, "There are people in there." Frowned. "You sure?" Frank's voice was flat. "I don't gamble with that." He started walking. Huey reached out like he could stop him with a hand. "Wait." Frank didn't stop. Butcher's grin returned. "There he goes." Cursed under his breath and moved with him. "Fine, but we stay together." Annie followed, light gathering faintly in her palms. Frank reached the side door first. He listened. Inside, he heard muffled voices. Crying. A woman saying, "Please." Frank's jaw set. He opened the door. The room was bright. Too bright. Floodlights pointed inward. A wide space with crates and catwalks. It smelled like metal and oil. In the center of the floor, a group of people huddled together. Not criminals. Ordinary. Scared. Hands tied. And above them, cameras on rails. A man in a suit stood near a director's chair like it was a movie set. He had an earpiece. He smiled like a shark. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man called, loud enough to echo. "The Skull Man has arrived." The floodlights snapped even brighter. Frank's eyes narrowed. The crying people flinched, blinking in the light. Huey whispered, "Oh no." Contractors stepped out from behind crates, guns raised, and then the air shifted again. Not a tear this time, a pressure, a presence. A silent figure dropped from the catwalk and landed on the floor without a sound. Black suit, black mask. No face, just darkness shaped like a man. Black Noir. Huey's heart slammed in his chest. He had seen Noir before. Everyone had. The silent killer Vought sent when it wanted a problem to disappear. Butcher's voice came out like a growl. "Of course." Frank didn't know the name, but he understood the posture. This wasn't a hero. This was a weapon. The suited man clapped once. "We're live in 30 seconds. Let's get a clean shot, yeah? Our brave security team takes down the terrorist. The public feels safe. Everybody wins." MM hissed. They staged this. The civilians. Annie's face twisted with anger. They're props. Frank's focus locked on the tied people. He stepped forward. A contractor shouted, "On your knees! Hands behind your head!" Frank didn't slow. The contractor fired. Bullets struck Frank's armor and snapped sparks. One hit his shoulder and spun him half a step. He grunted but stayed upright. Huey's eyes went wide. He's still walking." Frank raised his pistol and shot the contractor in the leg. Not to kill. To stop. The man dropped, screaming. Men's on Tempema moved fast, firing at the cameras. Sparks burst as lenses shattered. Frenchie threw a small device that popped smoke across the floor, gray and thick. The suited man cursed. "No, no, no! Keep the cameras!" Annie lifted her hands and flashed bright. The floodlights flickered and died for a second, thrown off by her power. In that second of darkness, Frank moved like a ghost. He cut toward the civilians. Noir moved too. Noir didn't run. He flowed. He closed the distance without wasted motion. Frank saw him in the dark, a black shape cutting through smoke. Frank didn't raise his gun at him first. He raised his body. He put himself between Noir and the tied people. Noir struck, a hard, fast punch to the throat. Frank blocked late. The hit still slammed into his jaw and rattled his teeth. Frank staggered a step. Noir followed with a knee to Frank's ribs. Frank's armor took some of it. Not all. Frank grabbed Noir's arm and tried to twist. Noir didn't fight like a street brawler. He fought like someone trained to kill quietly. He slipped the grip and drove an elbow into Frank's helmet, right above the eye. Frank's vision flashed. Huey watched from behind a crate, shaking. He's fighting Noir. He's actually... Butcher's eyes were bright with violent joy. Look at that. Our new mate's got bite. MM snapped. Focus. Get the civilians. Kimiko was already moving. She sprinted through smoke, grabbed one tied person, and ripped the rope apart like it was paper. Her face stayed blank, but her eyes were sharp. Frenchie followed, cutting ties with a knife, guiding people low. Go, go, stay low. Annie stepped into the open and threw light again. Not as a blast at people, but as a shield of brightness that made the contractors flinch and miss. But Noir didn't flinch. Noir kept coming. Frank backed up toward the civilians, not away from them. He pulled a knife and slashed at Noir's arm. Noir caught the wrist. The grip was like a vice. Frank felt it. The strength. Not Homelander's strength, but more than human. Noir's other hand came up with a blade of his own. Frank twisted his body just enough that the blade slid across armor instead of flesh. He headbutted Noir. Hard. Pain shot through Frank's skull. Noir's head snapped back a little. Just a little. Enough. Frank used the moment to drive his knife into Noir's thigh. Noir didn't scream. He didn't even grunt. He just grabbed Frank's arm and threw him. Frank slammed into a crate and went down on one knee. Huey gasped. Jesus. Frank pushed up, breathing heavy. He saw the suited man on the catwalk now, yelling into his earpiece. Where is Homelander? Get me Homelander. We need the real save. Butcher heard it too and smiled. They called the big boy. MM's face tightened. We leave. Now. Annie's voice shook, not with fear, but with anger. If Homelander shows up, people die. Frank looked up at the catwalk. He saw the cameras still running on backup power. He saw the civilians crawling toward an exit with Frenchie and Kimiko guiding them. He saw Noir step forward again, slow and sure. Frank took a breath. He didn't have to beat Noir in a fair fight. He just had to finish the real mission. Frank grabbed a small explosive from his belt. Simple. Military, not flashy. He slapped it onto a pillar that held the catwalk support. Noir lunged. Frank turned, fired 2 shots into the floor near Noir's feet, and rolled away as Noir reacted to the sound. The explosive blew. Not a building-shattering blast. A tight, sharp punch. The catwalk support snapped. Metal screamed. The catwalk tilted hard, dumping the suited man and 2 contractors onto the floor. The suited man hit the ground and shrieked. Frank moved through the chaos and grabbed him by the collar. Frank yanked him up and shoved him against a crate. The man's face was pale now. His smile was gone. "You stage this," Frank said. The man's eyes flicked to Noir, then to Frank. "I don't know what you are." Frank pressed the pistol to the man's cheek. "I'm the consequence," Frank said. MM's voice snapped. "We don't have time." Frank didn't look away from the man. "Who ordered this?" The man swallowed. "Vought. It's always Vought. They wanted a villain. They wanted your symbol on every screen." Frank's voice stayed low. "Why?" The man's lips trembled. "Because you're not theirs." Frank's grip tightened. Noir stepped closer. Frank felt it without looking. The shift. The quiet danger. Annie moved to block, hands glowing. "Back off." Noir didn't stop. Annie flared brighter, a painful white. The nearby camera sparked. A few more died. Noir kept walking, head angled, like the light didn't matter. Kimiko darted in and slammed into Noir from the side. Noir took the hit and turned with a fast elbow that caught Kimiko in the chest and sent her skidding. Kimiko rolled, then popped up again, healing already, eyes furious. Huey saw her and felt sick. "Kimiko!" Butcher grabbed Huey's shoulder. "Eyes up, Huey. We're leaving. Not crying." Huey hated him for that. But he was also right. MM pulled a flash device from his bag and tossed it toward Noir. It popped loud and bright. Noir's head turned. For the first time, he paused. Not stunned, just recalculating. Frank used the pause. He shoved the suited man toward Noir like a thrown object, a moving barrier. The suited man screamed and scrambled away, crawling on his hands like an animal. Frank didn't care about him anymore. He cared about time. He sprinted to the last group of civilians. One little girl looked up at him, face dirty, eyes wide. She stared at the skull on his chest like it was a monster. Frank crouched and cut her rope. "Go," Frank said, voice rough but controlled. "Move!" She hesitated. Huey appeared behind her, crouching, trying to smile. "It's okay. Come on, we'll get you out." The girl ran. Frank stood and turned back toward Noir. Noir was moving again. The smoke was thinning. The lights were flickering back on. And then Huey heard it. A sound like the sky itself was opening. A wind. A deep, heavy whoosh that came from above. Everyone looked up. A shadow passed across the warehouse roof. Then the roof tore open like paper. Metal screamed as something came through it. Homelander dropped into the building like a god falling out of heaven. He landed in the center of the floor with a loud crack. Dust burst outward. Loose crates rattled. He stood up slowly, smiling. His eyes swept over the scene. The tied people running. The broken cameras. Noir standing ready. The boys half hidden. The Skullman in the open. Homelander's smile grew. "Well," Homelander said, voice calm and bright like he was greeting fans. "This is messy." No one moved for a beat. Then Butcher whispered, so low it was barely a sound. "Run." MM didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Huey's arm. Annie's hands glowed brighter, more desperate now. Not to fight Homelander head-on. She knew better. She wanted to make space. Frenchie pulled civilians through the side exit. Kimiko shoved a last man out and turned back, ready to die if she had to. Frank stood still. Homelander looked at him like a child studying a bug that didn't flip over when poked. "You," Homelander said. "You're not scared." Frank's voice was steady. Should I be? Homelander's eyes narrowed, amused. Most people are. Frank didn't look away. He didn't puff up. He didn't act brave for cameras. His face was hidden, but his posture was clear. This wasn't courage for show. This was refusal. Homelander took one slow step forward. Noir shifted, like even he was waiting to see what Homelander would do. Annie's voice cracked with controlled fear. Frank. She stopped. She almost said a name she didn't know. Frank didn't answer her. Homelander's smile softened, fake and smooth. So what are you supposed to be? A vigilante? A soldier? Some kind of statement? Frank said, I'm here because you let people get hurt. Homelander laughed once, short. Oh, that's cute. He leaned in a little, like he was sharing a secret. This world hurts people, Homelander said, and it still loves me. Frank didn't blink. Homelander's eyes drifted down to the skull on Frank's chest, then back up. That symbol, Homelander said. People are already wearing it. Did you know that? Frank's voice went colder. I don't care what they wear. Homelander's smile sharpened. You will. He moved fast. Not a full attack. Not a fight. Just a blur step that put him right in front of Frank, close enough that Frank could feel the heat of him. Homelander lifted a hand and tapped Frank's chest, right on the skull. The tap was gentle. It still shoved Frank back half a step. Homelander spoke softly, but everyone heard it. You don't get to make a new story in my city, he said. Not unless I say so. Frank's muscles locked. Every survival instinct in him screamed to move, to strike, to do something. But Frank knew math. He knew force. He had hit a soup today and felt steel under skin. This was worse. Frank didn't try to punch Homelander. He didn't try to shoot him. He didn't waste the moment. Instead, Frank turned his head slightly and looked past Homelander to the exit where civilians were escaping. Then he did the only thing that mattered. He backed away, slow, controlled, keeping Homelander's eyes on him. Buying seconds. Dragged Huey through the door. Frenchie pushed the last civilians out. Kimiko stumbled after them, heeling, eyes still locked on Homelander, like she wanted to tear him apart. Annie stayed for one last second, light building in her palms. Not to hurt Homelander, to blind the cameras. She flashed. The remaining lenses sparked and died. The warehouse dropped into a half-dark, lit by emergency red lights. Homelander's head turned, irritated. And in that tiny turn, Frank moved. He grabbed the black case from the floor where he'd dropped it near the civilians. He rolled behind a crate, then sprinted for the side exit like a shadow, with purpose. Homelander didn't chase right away. He didn't need to. He floated up, slow, calm, letting everyone see him in the broken roof hole. He looked down into the darkness and smiled wider. "Run!" Homelander called out, almost cheerful. "I love this part." Outside, cold air hit Frank's mask. shoved him toward the van. "Move!" Frank moved. They piled in. Tires screamed. The van tore away from the docks, swerving through traffic. Huey looked back through the rear window, breath shaking. Did we get away?" Butcher stared forward, jaw tight, eyes alive. "From Homelander?" "No, mate. We didn't get away." Annie's hand still glowed faintly, like her anger had nowhere to go. "He let us go." MM's voice was grim. Which is worse? Frank sat in the back, the black case on his lap. His chest hurt, his jaw throbbed, his arms felt heavy. But his eyes were clear. He had seen the top of this world, a man in the sky who thought the city was his toy. Frank's hands closed around the case. He didn't know how he got here. He didn't know how to go home. But he knew one thing, simple and sharp. This world had monsters. And now, Those monsters knew he existed. Above the city, on a giant screen that still worked, the headline updated again. Vought hero saves hostages from Skullman terror attack. Homelander's smiling face filled the screen, and in the corner, a grainy frame of Frank running with the skull on his chest. A villain, written by someone else. Frank looked down at his gloves, then at the black case, then at the blurred city lights through the van window. He didn't speak, but inside his head, the plan began to form like a map. Names first, then routes. Then pressure points, and when the time was right, consequences. The van smelled like rubber and sweat and fear that nobody wanted to name. Frank sat in the back with the black case on his lap. His jaw still hurt where Noir's elbow had landed. His ribs ached where the armor had not been enough. He checked the case latch twice, then once more, like the act itself could keep the world steady. Huey kept looking back at him through the gap between the seats. "We're going to a different place," MM said, eyes on the road. His voice was calm, but his hands held the wheel too tight. "Old safe house is burned now. Not literally. Yet." Butcher snorted. "Give it time." Annie stared out the window. Her fingers kept flexing in her lap, like she was still holding light. Frenchie sat beside Kimiko, whispering in her ear like he always did when things got too close to death. Kimiko didn't answer with words. She answered with a small, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. Huey tried again. "So, what do we call you?" Frank didn't look at him. "You don't." Butcher leaned back in the passenger seat and twisted to look. "Come on, Skullman. We can't keep calling you mate and Murder Santa forever." Huey blinked. "You called him Murder Santa?" Butcher grinned. "He shows up, breaks things, ruins Votes Day. It fits." Frank's voice stayed flat. "Stop talking." Butcher's grin didn't move. "See? Festive." Huey swallowed and pulled his own phone out. His hand shook as he tapped the screen. "It's worse now," he said. Frank's eyes flicked to the phone. Huey hesitated, then turned it so Frank could see. A news clip auto-played. Bright studio lights, a smiling anchor. Under it, a banner in huge letters. "Vought hero saves hostages from Skullman terror attack." The clip jumped to shaky footage from the warehouse. The angle was tight. The edit was fast. It cut away from the tied people. It cut away from Vought's cameras. It showed Frank moving through smoke with a gun and made it look like he was hunting civilians. Then it showed Homelander landing in a burst of dust. It froze on his smile. "Another victory," the anchor chirped. "Thanks to Homelander and brave Vote security, the dangerous new extremist was driven back." Frank's hand shot out. Huey flinched, thinking Frank would crush the phone like before. Frank didn't crush it. He took it. He stared at the screen. He watched the edit again. He watched how the story was built like a trap. Then he handed it back. "Why are you giving it to me if you want it broken?" Frank asked. Huey blinked. I didn't." Frank looked away. "Then stop putting it in my face." Butcher laughed softly. "He hates phones, but he hates propaganda more. Welcome to the team." Frank didn't answer. Outside, the city rolled past. Neon, billboards, people living normal lives under a sky that belonged to a man who could cut planes in half. Frank's thoughts stayed simple. Find the people who do this. Name them. End them. The new safe house was smaller, dirtier, more hidden. A basement under an old shop that smelled like cardboard and dust. The kind of place nobody looked at twice. The kind of place that could still be found if Vought wanted it found. MM locked 3 bolts behind them. Frenchie set bags down and started laying out gear, like a cook setting out knives. Annie leaned against the wall, breathing through her nose, trying to keep her anger from lighting the room. Huey shut his laptop and looked up. Okay, we need to talk about what just happened. Butcher dropped into a chair and kicked his boots up again, like chaos was a pillow. We got away. That's what happened. No, said. Homelander let us go. That's different. Butcher waved a hand. Same outcome. Annie's voice snapped. It's not the same. He could have killed all of us in 2 seconds. Kimiko made a quick motion with her fingers, like slicing a throat, then pointed up, then shrugged. Yes. 2 seconds. Huey rubbed his forehead. Why would he let us go? Frank stood near the far wall, watching all of them like they were a room full of loaded guns. Because he wanted to. Butcher smiled at that, like it was a compliment. Exactly. Stepped closer to Frank. You saw him. You felt him. You can't fight him head on. Frank's eyes stayed calm. I don't fight gods. I fight men. Annie let out a sharp breath. He's not a god. Frank didn't blink. He acts like one. Butcher leaned forward. So we don't punch the sky. We cut the wires holding the stage up. That's how you kill a god. You take away his crowd. Huey looked between them. Okay, and how do we do that? Frenchie lifted a small hard drive like it was treasure. From the warehouse, I grabbed it. It had camera routing. Backups, not all of it. But some. Nodded. Proof. Frank's voice was low. Proof doesn't stop bullets. Held his gaze. Proof makes people look. People looking is how you weaken Vought. Frank's jaw tightened. People looked at that footage and cheered. They didn't see the hostages. Annie's eyes flashed. Because Vought cut it. Frank's eyes went to her. Then you don't win by asking nicely. Butcher clapped once. Finally, we're speaking the same language. Annie turned on him. No, he's not speaking your language. Butcher's smile faded. Don't pretend you don't want them to pay. I do, Annie said, but I won't become them. Frank's voice cut in, sharp and simple. You already were them. The room went quiet. Huey's stomach dropped. He knew Frank didn't mean it as an insult, not exactly. It was just a fact in Frank's world. You wore the uniform. You carried the weight. Annie's face tightened. She took a step closer, not scared, just hurt. I'm trying to fix what I did. Frank stared at her for a long beat. Then, softer, he said, Then act like it. Held up a hand. Enough. We're not doing this now. Butcher leaned back again, grin returning. We are doing it now. That's the fun part. Our skullmate here doesn't do speeches. He does consequences. Frank ignored him and looked at You said you want Vought to burn. Said, Yes. Frank said, Then give me names. Huey blinked. Names of who? Frank's voice didn't change. Who staged that warehouse? Who tied those people? Who called Homelander like it was a show? Who makes the drug? Who sells the lie? Frenchie said, It is not one name. Frank nodded once. Then start with one. Butcher's eyes gleamed. I've got a list. Snapped. No. We do this smart. Frank looked at them both, then said, the thing that made Huey feel cold. I don't need you, Frank said. I need information. Butcher's grin thinned again. Oof. That stings. Mate! Annie stared at Frank. Then why are you here? Frank answered without pride. Because you know this world? Huey saw it then. Frank wasn't asking for friends. He was asking for a map. Upstairs in Vought Tower, the air felt clean. Too clean. Like even the oxygen had a sponsor. Homelander stood in front of a wall of screens, showing clips of the Skullman. He watched the warehouse fight on repeat. He watched the moment in the dark, where the man didn't beg. He watched the moment in the bright, where the man didn't run until it mattered. Ashley paced behind him, clutching a tablet like it was a life raft. Her hair was perfect, and her eyes looked like they hadn't slept in a week. "We're controlling it," Ashley said fast. "We're controlling the narrative. We're pushing terrorist. We've got merch designs already. We'll bury the hostage part. We'll push the gunman part." Homelander turned his head slowly. Ashley stopped talking. On another screen, a kid in a park held up a phone and showed his friend a skull sticker. They laughed. They slapped it on a lamppost. Homelander's jaw tightened. "Why is it spreading?" Homelander asked, voice soft. Ashley swallowed. "Because it's edgy. It's simple. People like simple." Homelander stared at the skull symbol like it was a bug on his plate. "People are supposed to like me," he said. "They do," Ashley rushed. "They love you. You're the... Homelander smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Then why do they like him?" Ashley's hands shook. We're going to fix it." Homelander looked back at the screens. He watched the skull man's eyes through the mask. "That's not a soup," Homelander said. "I can tell." Ashley blinked. "But he took bullets." "He had armor," Homelander said. "He's just stubborn." He said the last word like it was disgusting. A door opened quietly. Stan Edgar walked in like the building belonged to him, not to Homelander. Stan didn't look at the screens first. He looked at Homelander. "This is making noise," Stan said. Homelander's smile returned, practiced. "It's under control." Stan's eyes moved to the skull symbol on the screen. "Control is not the same as calm." Homelander's voice stayed sweet. "We made him a villain." Stan nodded. "And now he's a brand." Homelander's eyes narrowed. "I don't like it." Stan's tone didn't change. "Then solve it." Homelander's gaze flicked toward a darker corner of the room. Black Noir stood there, silent as a shadow. Homelander pointed at the screen. "Find him." Noir tilted his head once. Homelander walked closer to the screen, close enough that the glow painted his face. "And when you find him, don't kill him yet." Ashley's mouth opened. "What?" Homelander's smile widened. "I want to talk." Stan watched him for a moment. "Make sure the conversation ends the way we need it to." Homelander didn't look away from the screen. "Oh, it will." He leaned in slightly, like he was whispering to the skull man through the glass. "I want to see what makes you tick," Homelander said. "And then I want to hear you break." Back in the basement safe house, Huey couldn't stop thinking about the hostages. He kept seeing their faces in his head, the way they flinched at the lights, the way they crawled for the door. He opened his laptop again and pulled up every clip he could find. Vought cuts. Phone videos, comments, memes. It felt like the whole city had turned real fear into a joke in less than an hour. But there were cracks, tiny videos that Vought hadn't caught yet, a shaky angle from the top of a stack of crates, a clip where you could hear a man in a suit say, "We're live in 30 seconds." Huey paused it. His heart pounded. He leaned in and boosted the audio. "We're live in 30 seconds. Let's get a clean shot." Huey's eyes widened. "Guys." MM came over. Annie followed. Frenchie leaned in too. Butcher looked up from cleaning a gun like he was bored. "What?" Huey pointed at the screen. "Listen." They listened. Annie's face went pale. That's proof." MM nodded, slow. "That's a staging call." Butcher's grin came back. "That's beautiful." Frank stood behind them, watching the screen, silent. Huey looked at him. "If we can get enough of this, we can show people what Vought really is." Frank's voice was quiet. "And then what?" Huey blinked. Then they get angry. Then they stop cheering." Frank's eyes didn't soften. People get angry for a day. Then they go back to work. Monsters don't. Annie turned to Frank. So what's your plan? Frank didn't answer right away. He walked to a table and opened his case. He set the vials down carefully. Frenchie's eyes locked on them. Those are not normal, Frank said. I don't know what they are. I found them with the device that brought me here. Stared. That device is a Vought thing? Frank shook his head once. Logo was Vought. I don't know if it was theirs or stolen. Butcher leaned in like a kid at a candy store. If that's Compound V, we just got ourselves a new game. Annie's voice went sharp. No. Nodded. No. We're not using it. Butcher rolled his eyes. God, you're all boring. Frank closed the case. I'm not here for drugs. Butcher stared at him. Then what are you here for? Frank looked him straight in the face. I told you. Names. Butcher's smile tightened. I've got names. Frank's voice didn't rise. Not yours. Real ones. The people behind it. The ones who sign papers and sleep at night. Huey felt a chill. Frank didn't hate a cape because it was strong. Frank hated the person who chose to use strength on the weak. That was a different kind of problem. Later, while the others argued in low voices, Huey noticed something on the floor near Frank's bag. A small metal chain, a dog tag. It must have slipped out when Frank tossed the bag down. Huey crouched and picked it up. The tag was scratched and worn, like it had been through fire and water and time. He flipped it. The name was stamped deep. Frank Castle. Huey's throat tightened. He stared at it like it was a ghost. He had expected Skullman to be some weird nickname, a rumor, a symbol. But this was a name. A real name. Huey stood and walked over to Annie quietly. He held the tag out in his palm. Annie's eyes widened. Where did you get that? It fell, Huey whispered. Look. Annie read it, then looked up at Frank across the room. Frank sat alone on a chair, head lowered slightly, hands resting on his knees like he was waiting for a door to open. Annie walked over. Huey followed, nervous. Annie stopped a few feet away. Frank. Frank's head lifted a little, his eyes locked on the dog tag in Annie's hand. For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. Annie's voice was softer now. Is this you? Frank stared at the tag. His jaw clenched once. Then he nodded. Huey swallowed. Frank Castle. Frank's voice came out low. Don't say it loud. Annie frowned. Why? They already. Frank cut her off. They don't know who I am. They know a symbol. Keep it that way. Huey blinked. Why does that matter? Frank looked at Huey like the question hurt in a stupid way. Because names have families attached. Huey's mouth went dry. Annie's face shifted. Is your family? Frank didn't answer with words. He looked away, and the silence answered for him. Huey felt a weight drop into his chest. He'd seen grief in Butcher. He'd seen it in Annie. He'd seen it in himself. But Frank's grief looked like a locked door with a gun behind it. Annie held the tag out again. Do you want it back? Frank took it slowly, like it was heavy. Thanks, Frank said. The word sounded rough, like he didn't use it much. He tucked it under his shirt, close to skin, under armor, under the skull. Huey realized something then. Vought had made the symbol loud. Frank kept the name quiet. That made the symbol scarier. Newman didn't call the safe house directly. She didn't have to. A message landed in Butcher's hands through a chain of contacts, a polite invitation, wrapped in a threat. Butcher read it aloud, grinning. Mr. Butcher, I believe we have shared interests. I can offer safety, access, and a path to real change. Meet me. MM's face went hard. No. Butcher waved the paper, Oh, come on. It's like Christmas. Everyone's sending us gifts. Annie crossed her arms. It's a trap. Frenchie shrugged. Everything is a trap. We choose which trap we can survive. Huey looked at Frank. What do you think? Frank didn't look impressed. She wants to use you. Butcher smiled. Finally, we agree. Frank's eyes cut to him. And you want to use me. Butcher's grin didn't move. I want to win. Frank leaned forward slightly. Winning isn't the same as justice. Butcher's eyes went sharp. In this world, it's the closest you get. MM stepped between them like a wall. We're not meeting her. Not now. Not with Homelander sniffing around. Butcher sighed like a man forced to eat vegetables. Fine. Later. Huey didn't like how later sounded when Butcher said it. That night, Frank didn't sleep. He sat at the table with paper maps, not screens. He drew lines with a pen. He marked Vought Tower. He marked the docks. He marked the warehouse. He marked camera clusters the boys had learned to avoid. Huey watched from a corner, half awake, hugging a mug of cold coffee. Why paper? Huey asked quietly. Frank didn't look up. Paper doesn't report back. Huey nodded. Fair. Frank made another mark. Vought moves like a company. Routes, deliveries, schedules. Huey leaned in. You're building a target list. Frank's pen paused. A target map. Huey swallowed. You're going to go alone. Frank didn't deny it. Huey's voice got small. We can help. Frank finally looked at him. His eyes were tired, but focused. Helping gets you killed. Huey's jaw tightened. We're already in it. Frank's gaze flicked to the other room, where Annie sat awake too, quiet and tense. Where MM cleaned a weapon and tried not to think. Where Butcher stared at nothing like he was tasting revenge. Frank looked back at Huey. You think you're in it? You're standing near the fire. Huey felt anger spark, hot and quick. So what? You're the only one allowed to burn. Frank's expression didn't change. I'm the one already burned. Huey didn't have an answer for that. Frank slid a piece of paper toward Huey, a list of simple words. Find, compound, route, black sites, security contractors, who signs orders. Huey stared. You want me to do this? Frank nodded. You're good with phones. Huey almost laughed. You hate phones. Frank's voice was flat. I hate being tracked. Use them anyway. That was the closest Frank came to admitting trust. Huey took the paper like it mattered, and then, when Huey looked up again, Frank was already packing his gear. Quiet. Efficient. No speech, just motion. MM noticed and stepped into the doorway. Where are you going? Frank didn't stop packing. To find the route. MM's eyes narrowed. Alone. Frank clipped a magazine into place. Yes. Annie stepped closer. Frank, if you get seen again, Homelander. Frank cut her off. He already saw me. Butcher appeared behind them, smiling like a man watching a show start. Let him go. He's a big boy. MM turned on Butcher. Shut up. Butcher shrugged. If he wants to hunt, let him hunt. That's what he does. Frank slung the black case under his arm. Stay out of my way. Huey stepped forward. At least take a phone. Frank looked at him. Huey held up a burner, already unlocked, already set to one screen with one button. Call. Frank stared at it like it was a snake. Huey said, No apps, no passcodes. Just one button. Frank hesitated. Then he took it and shoved it into a pocket without looking. Huey felt weirdly proud, like he'd taught a bear how to use a door. Frank walked to the stairs. Annie called after him, voice tight. If you find something, don't do it alone. Frank didn't turn around. He said, If it's innocent, I won't. Then he was gone, and the room felt colder. Frank moved through the city like a problem that knew how to hide. He didn't look up at billboards. He looked at loading bays. He watched trucks and uniforms. He tracked patterns. He saw the Vote logo on a delivery truck that should not have had it. He saw a security team swap plates on a van. He watched them leave a parking garage at the same time every night. He followed from a distance. He used reflections and crowds like cover. People walked past him holding phones up, laughing at a meme about the Skull Man. A cartoon skull with laser eyes. A fake cape. A joke. Frank's jaw tightened. He wasn't a joke. He wasn't a character. He was a man with a mission. The van with swapped plates turned off the main road and headed toward a darker part of the city. Industrial. Quiet. Less cameras. Frank followed until the buildings got shorter and the streetlights got farther apart. Then the van crossed onto a private road. A fence line rose ahead. No signs. No welcome. Just a guard booth and cameras. Frank stopped behind a tree line and watched. He could see through a gap. A woman in a white coat walked between two guards. Her hands were shaking. She looked like someone forced to work. A cry echoed from inside the fence. Quick! Cut off! Frank's body went still. He didn't need more proof. He needed a way in. Huey got the call 3 hours later. The burner phone on the table buzzed like a trapped insect. Everyone froze. Grabbed it first. He stared at the screen like it could explode. Unknown number. Hit the button. Frank's voice came through, low and controlled. Fence. Private road. They're holding people. MM's face tightened. Where? Frank gave a location in simple directions. Not Vote Tower, not on maps. Annie stepped closer, listening. Is it a lab? Frank paused. It's a cage. Butcher's grin appeared like it couldn't help itself. Oh, now we're cooking. Snapped. Not like that. Frank's voice stayed steady. If you come quiet. If you slow me down, you don't come at all. Took a breath. We're coming. Frank didn't sound happy. Don't bring a phone that tracks, Huey muttered. That's kind of funny coming from... shot him a look. Frank hung up. The room moved at once. Frenchie grabbed gear. Annie rolled her shoulders like she was preparing for a storm. Kimiko cracked her neck, eyes bright and violent. Butcher loaded a weapon with calm joy. Grabbed Huey's jacket. Stay close. Huey's mouth went dry. We're going into a secret vote cage. Nodded. Yeah. Huey whispered. Okay. But his hands shook anyway. Frank didn't wait. By the time the boys reached the tree line, Frank was already inside the fence. He had cut through a blind spot between camera sweeps. He had slipped under the wire where the ground dipped. He had moved like a shadow through a service yard. Inside, the place looked like a care center from the outside. Soft colors. Calm signs. A fake feeling of safety. But the doors were thick. The windows were narrow. The guards had rifles. Frank stayed low in a strip of dark between buildings. He heard a voice inside one of them. A man screaming, then a woman sobbing, then silence. Frank's teeth clenched. He moved. He slipped to a side entrance, picked the lock, and slid inside. The hallway smelled like cleaning chemical and fear. He saw a sign on the wall. Wellness Wing. Frank's eyes stayed cold. He knew what people called cages to feel better about building them. A guard rounded a corner. Frank grabbed him, pulled him into the dark, and lowered him to the floor without a loud sound. He took the guard's key card. He kept moving. He reached a door with a small window. He looked through. A cell. Inside, a teenage boy sat on the floor with his knees pulled up. His arms were strapped. His eyes were wide and empty. A needle mark showed on his neck. The boy looked up and saw the skull. His lips moved. No sound. Frank's hand tightened on the door handle. He swiped the card. The door clicked. The boy flinched hard and tried to crawl backward even while strapped. Frank crouched slowly, keeping his movements clear. "I'm not Vought," Frank said. The boy stared like he didn't believe any word could be true. Frank reached for the straps. The boy shook his head fast, panicked, mouthing something like, "No, no, no." Frank paused. He listened. Footsteps. A cart rolling. Voices. Frank looked back at the hall, then back at the boy. "Stay quiet," Frank said. He cut one strap, then another, faster now. The boy's hands came free. He grabbed his own arms like he was checking if they were real. Frank stood and moved to the hall. Two staff in white coats approached with a guard. They were talking about dosage, like they were talking about coffee. Frank stepped into view. The guard raised his weapon. Frank fired once into the guard's leg. The guard went down screaming. One of the staff screamed too. The other froze, eyes huge. Frank moved forward. "Where are the files?" Frank asked. The staff stammered. "Whoa, what?" Frank grabbed the cart and shoved it into the wall with a crash. Vials clinked. A clipboard fell. "Where are the files?" Frank repeated. The staff pointed down the hall with a shaking hand. "Administration. Basement." Frank's eyes cut to the door the staff came from. More cells. More people. A sound echoed from deeper inside the building. Not footsteps. A heavier thud, like something big shifting its weight. Frank's skin prickled. Soups. Not the sky god, but something dangerous enough. Frank turned back to the boy in the cell. "Can you walk?" Frank asked. The boy nodded fast, still terrified. Frank pointed down the hall. "Go that way. Find an exit. If anyone stops you, scream." The boy swallowed. They'll... Frank's voice went hard. "Scream anyway." The boy ran. Frank moved toward the basement stairs. This was his side mission. Not glory. Not revenge. A map. A list. A way to stop the machine. Outside, the boys watched the facility like it was a sleeping animal. Annie's eyes narrowed as she scanned the fence. "This place is real." MM nodded. "Yeah." Frenchie whispered, "I have heard rumors. Places where they hide the ones that do not fit the story." Kimiko's face twisted with something like hatred. Butcher grinned like he was about to open a present. "And now, we open it." Huey swallowed. "Where's Frank?" MM pointed. "Already inside." Huey's stomach dropped. "Of course he is." They moved. They cut the fence in the same blind spot Frank used, because Frank left it open on purpose. Huey felt that like a punch in the chest. Frank didn't want them, but he still made a path. They slipped in and reached a side door. Frenchie picked the lock fast. They entered. The hallway was clean and quiet and wrong. Annie saw a smear on the wall. Dry blood, wiped badly. She clenched her jaw. "God!" A scream echoed from deeper inside. Huey froze. MM grabbed his shoulder and pushed him forward. "Move!" They moved. They found the first cells. People inside. Not all soups. Some normal. Some sick. Some terrified. Some with IV lines. Huey felt like he couldn't breathe. Annie's light flickered. Not bright. Just enough to see faces. A woman in a cell pressed her hands to the glass. "Help!" she mouthed. MM's voice went quiet, pained. "We can't open every door," Annie snapped. "We have to try." Butcher's eyes moved down the hall, calculating. "We take the files. We take proof. Then we come back with a plan." Huey stared at him. "They're right here." Butcher's face went cold. "And if we die right here, they die anyway." Kimiko made a sharp sound in her throat, angry and torn. Frenchie whispered, "We do both. We try." They moved faster. They heard gunfire ahead. One shot, then another. Frank. They ran toward it. Frank reached the basement door and saw the security panel. He didn't pick it. He planted a small charge and stepped back. The blast was tight. The door buckled. The lock failed. Frank went through. The basement was darker. The air was warmer. The hum of machines filled the space. Rows of shelves held boxes labeled with numbers instead of names. A desk sat in the middle with a computer. Papers spread across it. Frank moved to the desk and started grabbing anything that looked like a list. Shipment logs, dosage charts, names of doctors. A folder stamped, "Vought Confidential." Frank's eyes narrowed. He opened it. Inside were photos. People. Some were kids. Some had bruises. Some had notes like unstable and discard. Frank's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. A sound behind him. A slow inhale. Frank spun. A man stood in the doorway. Not a guard. Not a doctor. A soup. He was tall, muscular, wearing a simple Vought security suit. No cape, no smile. His eyes looked tired and mean. He cracked his knuckles. Frank didn't aim at his chest. He aimed at his face and fired. The bullets hit. The soup's head snapped back, but he didn't fall. He smiled, small and ugly. "Cute," the soup said. Frank moved. He threw a flashbang low and dove behind the desk. The flash popped bright. The soup staggered half a step, blinking. Frank used that half step. He fired at the soup's knees. The bullets did more there. The soup grunted and dropped to one knee. Not broken. Not done. But slowed. Frank grabbed the folder and shoved it into his bag. The soup lunged. Frank rolled away and slammed the desk into him, tipping it over. Papers flew. The soup shoved it off like it was nothing and charged again. Frank didn't try to trade punches. He ran. He sprinted up the stairs, the soup right behind him. The hallway above felt suddenly too small. Frank heard the boys' footsteps from the other direction. Too late. Too close. Frank hit the top of the stairs and saw them. Annie, Frenchie, Kimiko, Huey. Their faces changed when they saw what was chasing him. The soup came into view behind Frank. Annie's hands lit up bright. The soup shielded his eyes and kept moving. Kimiko lunged. She hit the soup like a car crash. The soup slid back 2 steps, then grabbed her by the throat and slammed her into the wall. Kimiko's head hit hard. Huey gasped. Kimiko's eyes stayed open. She grabbed the soup's wrist and dug her nails in. Blood showed. The soup laughed and squeezed. Frank moved in fast and slammed his knife into the soup's side. The blade sank in. The soup barely reacted. He backhanded Frank across the chest. Frank flew into the wall and hit hard. Huey cried out, "Frank!" Frank's vision flashed. He pushed up anyway. Annie blasted light straight into the soup's face, not as a beam of heat, but as a hard, bright pulse. The hallway lights exploded. Glass rained down. The soup staggered, blinded for a second. Fired into the soup's knee, not to kill, to slow. Frenchie threw a device that sparked and screamed, a loud high sound that made the soup flinch and cover his ears. For a second, the soup looked human, hurt, angry. And in that second, Kimiko ripped free and slammed her fist into his jaw. The soup's teeth clacked. He stumbled back. Frank grabbed Huey by the shoulder as he passed. "Move, civilians," Frank said. Huey blinked. "What?" Frank pointed down the hall. "Cells, get them out. Now." Shouted, "We don't have time." Frank snapped, "We make time." Butcher's voice came from behind them, stepping into the hall late, calm as always. "We're not saving everyone. We're leaving." Annie turned on him. "Shut up," Butcher shrugged. "If you want to die here, be my guest." MM's face twisted with fury. "Not now!" The soup roared and charged again, shaking off pain like it was rain. Frank didn't meet him head on. He stepped aside and fired at the ceiling sprinkler pipe. The pipe burst. Water sprayed down hard. The floor became slick. The soup's boot slipped for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. Kimiko grabbed the soup's arm and pulled. Annie blasted again, this time at the wall behind the soup, blowing out tiles and making a cloud of dust. Frenchie shoved a cart into the soup's legs. Fired at the soup's other knee. The soup dropped, snarling, one knee on the wet floor. He was still not done, but he was pinned. Frank stepped in and pressed his pistol to the soup's head. Huey froze, watching. Annie's breath caught. M's eyes widened. "Frank!" Frank didn't fire. He held it there for a hard beat, then lowered the gun. "Not the point," Frank said. He turned away, as if the soup was already dead. Butcher stared at him like he didn't understand. "What are you doing?" Frank's voice stayed cold. "Saving the ones who can't fight back." Butcher's smile vanished. "That's not how you win." Frank looked at him. "That's how I do this." Swallowed. "Okay." We split. Fast. "Huey, Frenchie, get doors. Annie, cover. Kimiko, help move people." Huey's legs finally moved. He ran to the nearest cell door and grabbed the handle. It was locked. He looked at Frank, panic rising. Frank tossed him the key card. Huey caught it and swiped. The door clicked. A man inside crawled out, shaking, eyes wide. Another door opened. Then another. Voices filled the hall, crying, coughing. Bare feet slapping wet floor. Annie stood in the middle like a lighthouse, light flickering from her hands, keeping the hall bright enough to stop panic. Kimiko lifted a woman over her shoulder like she weighed nothing. Frenchie guided a little kid forward, whispering, it's okay, go." Huey felt tears threaten to spill and forced them back. "This way," he told people. "This way. Keep moving." Butcher stood at the end of the hall, looking past them, listening. Then he said, "Lo, we've got company." Looked up. "What?" Butcher pointed. From the far door, a squad of armed men in black rushed in. Not normal guards, professionals. Behind them, a familiar silent shape stepped through. Black Noir. Huey's blood ran cold. Annie's light flared brighter by instinct. Noir didn't slow. Shouted, "Move them! Now!" Panic hit the freed people like a wave. Huey shoved them forward. "Go! Don't stop!" Frank stepped into the center of the hallway between Noir and the crowd. Kimiko moved beside him, breathing hard, eyes wild. For a second, they stood back to back, the skull and the survivor. Noir stopped just long enough to assess. Then he moved. Fast, clean, silent. Frank threw a flashbang. Noir turned his head at the exact right time, not fully blinded. Frank fired at Noir's chest. The bullets hit armor. Noir kept coming. Kimiko slammed into Noir, trying to knock him down. Noir rolled with it, used her momentum, and flipped her into the wall. Kimiko hit hard, then bounced up again, healing already, teeth bared. Frank went for Noir's legs. Noir avoided the strike and sliced at Frank's arm with a blade. Frank's armor took most of it, but a line of blood appeared. Huey saw it and felt sick. Annie blasted the floor in front of Noir, cracking tile and throwing dust. Noir stepped through it like it was nothing. The black-suited contractors aimed rifles down the hall at the fleeing people. Fired at them, forcing them behind cover. Frenchie threw smoke. The hallway became chaos. And in the chaos, Butcher did something stupid. He pulled out a block of explosives. Saw it and shouted, "No!" Butcher's eyes were hard. "We blow the wing. We erase the files. We make it hurt." Annie screamed. "There are people still in cells?" Butcher didn't blink. "Then move faster." Huey stared at him, horrified. "Are you serious?" Butcher's jaw clenched. Dead serious. Frank heard it all while fighting. He saw a woman stumble, too weak to run. He saw a kid freeze, staring at Noir like he was death in human shape. Frank made a choice fast. He grabbed the kid with one hand and shoved him behind Huey. "Take him," Frank ordered. Huey grabbed the kid, shaking. Okay. Frank turned to Butcher. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He walked straight toward him in the middle of a fight. He slammed Butcher into the wall and ripped the explosives from his hand. Butcher's eyes went wide with pure rage. "What the hell are you doing?" Frank's voice was a growl. "You don't kill them to hurt your enemy." Butcher spat. "They'll kill them anyway." Frank shoved the explosives into Butcher's chest, hard enough to hurt. "Then you stop them. You don't join them." Stared like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Annie looked shocked. Huey felt something twist in his chest. Frank was the killer, the scary one. And right now, he was the line. Noir moved again, trying to cut through toward the fleeing people. Kimiko tackled him and held on, taking hit after hit, refusing to let go. Annie blasted the contractors' rifles, ruining them with heat and light. Frenchie guided the last civilians to the door, coughing in smoke. Shouted, "Go, go!" Frank turned back to Noir. Noir's blade flashed. Frank caught the wrist, twisted, and drove Noir into the wall. Noir didn't break. He slid out and struck again. Frank took the hit on armor and kept moving. He grabbed a metal cabinet and tipped it over into Noir's path. Noir dodged, but it slowed him. Just enough. "Out!" yelled. Frank backed toward the exit, never turning his back on Noir. Kimiko limped backward too, eyes still locked. Annie walked backward, hands glowing, ready to blind or burn if Noir lunged. They spilled out into the night air. Sirens sounded in the distance, but these weren't normal police sirens. These were Vought sirens, the kind that came when a story needed to be cleaned. They ran. They shoved civilians into the van first. They crammed them in like a rescue, not a plan. Huey held the kid tight as the van door slammed. Gunned the engine. They tore away from the facility as floodlights swept the fence line behind them. Frank sat on the floor of the van, back against the wall, bleeding from his arm, breathing hard. The black case was still with him. The folder was still in his bag. Not all of it. Not enough. But something. Huey looked down at Frank, shaking. You didn't kill that soup. Back there, you could have." Frank's eyes were dark. Later. Annie stared at him, still angry at the world. "Why did you stop Butcher?" Frank looked at her. "Because you don't burn the innocent to light your way." Butcher, sitting across from him, rubbed his neck where Frank had slammed him. His eyes were furious. "You think you're better than me," Butcher said. Frank didn't flinch. "I don't care." exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "We got people out." Frenchie nodded, voice soft. "Yes, we did." Kimiko leaned her head back and closed her eyes, blood drying on her skin, healing already. Huey looked at the rescued faces in the van, terrified. Alive. Then he looked at the phone screens, some of them still held, shaking in their hands. Already recording. He realized something with a cold twist. Even this rescue could become content. Even this could be stolen. Outside, the city lights flashed by. Inside, Frank stared forward, quiet and hard. He had come here to build a target map. Now he had something worse. A place, a proof of cages, and a new truth that settled in his bones like concrete. In this world, the monster didn't just wear a cape. The monster owned the cameras, and somewhere above it all, a man in the sky was going to hear about a skull symbol breaking people out of a Vought cage. Homelander wouldn't laugh this time. He would come. 2 weeks passed, but the city did not calm down. Vought kept pushing the same story. The Skullman was a terrorist. The Skullman was a danger. The Skullman was a new threat, like a new movie villain. And still, the skull kept showing up. On stickers, on cheap shirts, on a kid's notebook. on a wall under a smiling Vought billboard. Frank noticed it every time. He never smiled. He worked out of whatever corner the team could hold for more than a night. A basement one day, a storage room the next, a borrowed apartment after that, with the curtains shut and the lights low. He didn't decorate. He didn't settle. He built maps. Paper maps. He taped them to walls. He drew routes with pen. He circled loading docks and garages. He marked places where Vought trucks went at odd hours. He didn't look for capes first. He looked for cages. Huey watched him do it, and it made his chest feel tight in a way he could not name. Huey had never seen someone build a war out of simple lines and notes. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was like watching someone sharpen a knife again and again until it could cut air. On day 3, Huey came in holding a cheap burner phone like it was a peace offering. "No passcode," Huey said quickly. "I set it up. It only does one thing." Frank didn't look up. Phones do more than one thing. "This one won't," Huey insisted. He held it out. "It calls me, that's it." Frank stared at it like it was a trap. Huey swallowed. "Just take it. Please." Frank took it. He turned it over once. He pressed the button. The screen lit up and showed one word. Call Frank stared for a beat too long, then put it in his pocket without a sound. Huey let out a breath. From the doorway, Butcher's voice floated in. "Look at that, Huey. You trained the bear." Huey's face warmed. "Shut up." Butcher stepped in, eyes bright. Like he always got brighter when things got worse. "All right. Everyone's here." MM came in behind him, steady and tired. Annie followed, quiet, jaw tight. Frenchie and Kimiko came last, Frenchie talking softly, Kimiko listening with her eyes. MM set a folder down on the table. "We're running out of places to hide." Annie crossed her arms. "Vought is sweeping the city. They're checking cameras. They're paying people to snitch." Frenchie added, "And they are moving the survivors, the ones we saved. They will hunt them." Huey felt sick. He kept seeing the kid he carried out of the cage, the kid's hands shaking, the kid's eyes darting like he expected a hand to reach from the dark and pull him back. Frank didn't sit. He stood near the wall, arms loose, ready to move. MM looked at Frank. "We need to decide what we are doing with the proof." Frank's eyes stayed flat. "We release it." Butcher laughed once. "That's simple, is it?" Frank looked at him. "Yes." Butcher leaned in. "And then what? People watch a video, get mad, post a comment, and go back to buying Vought cereal?" Annie snapped. "Don't." Butcher spread his hands. "It's true." Frank's voice was low. "Proof doesn't win the war, but it can change the field." MM nodded. "Exactly." Huey blinked. "Field." MM looked at him. "If people start doubting, Vought has to work harder. They make mistakes. They get scared." Annie's eyes narrowed. "And when Vought gets scared, people die." Frank's jaw tightened. "People are dying already." Silence hit the room. Kimiko looked down at her hands, then up again. Her eyes said, "Yes, we know." Butcher broke the silence with a grin. "All right then, here's the plan." MM's face hardened. "No, you don't get to say that. Not after last time." Butcher's grin didn't move. "Last time, we got out alive. We even saved people. Everyone's happy." Annie's voice went cold. "You were ready to blow the whole wing with people inside." Butcher stared back. "And I didn't. Did I?" Frank stepped closer, not threatening, just present. "You didn't," Frank said, "because I stopped you." Butcher's smile twitched. "Yeah, you did." For a second, Huey thought Butcher would swing. He didn't. But Huey could feel the anger sitting under Butcher's skin like a live wire. MM took a slow breath. We do this together, with rules. We don't use people as bait. Butcher's eyes slid to Frank. That depends on what our new mate wants. Everyone looked at Frank. Frank didn't flinch. I want the cages shut, Butcher scoffed. Dream big. Frank's eyes sharpened. I want the ones who built them to feel fear. Annie held Frank's gaze. That's fair. MM nodded once. Okay. Huey raised his hand a little, like he was in school. How do we even get the proof out? Vought controls everything. Frenchie tapped his temple. We do not use their pipes. Huey frowned. Pipes? Frenchie shrugged. Their system. Their feeds. Their studios. Annie leaned forward. We use everyone else. Huey's stomach flipped. You mean phones? Annie's mouth tightened. Yeah. The thing they can't fully stop. Not if enough people are filming. Frank's eyes narrowed, like the word itself bothered him. But he didn't argue. MM opened the folder and slid out a few printed stills. The staging call. The tied hostages. The wellness sign on the cage wing. A doctor's name. A list of shipments with times and routes. This is enough to start a fire, MM said. Not enough to burn them down, but enough to make smoke. Butcher smiled. Smoke gets in eyes. Frank's voice stayed flat. Where do we light it? MM pointed at one of the prints. There's a Vout charity event in 3 days. Homelander is doing a visit. Cameras everywhere. Annie's face tightened. They're using a wellness center as a backdrop. Huey stared at the paper. It's the same kind of place. Frenchie nodded. A pretty mask on an ugly thing. Butcher's grin widened. Perfect. MM shook his head. We are not attacking Homelander. Butcher's eyes rolled. No kidding? Frank spoke, simple. We bring survivors. Huey froze. What? Frank looked at him. They speak. On camera. In front of him. If he lies, they show bruises. If he threatens, people see. Annie swallowed. That's dangerous. Frank's voice didn't soften. Everything is dangerous. MM looked torn. We can't put them in front of Homelander. Frank's eyes stayed steady. Vought already did. Huey's throat tightened. Kimiko made a small sound, sharp and angry, and pointed toward the door, like she wanted to run out and tear down every Vought sign with her bare hands. Frenchie placed a hand on her shoulder. We do it smart, he murmured. Butcher leaned back. All right. Survivors on camera. We leak the files. We make Homelander look like what he is. Annie said. And if he kills someone on camera? Butcher's smile went thin. Then everyone sees. MM snapped. That is not a plan. Frank said. Then we protect them. Annie looked at Frank. How? You can't stop him. Frank didn't lie. Not with force. He paused, then added. With timing. Huey felt cold. What does that mean? Frank's eyes moved to the paper again. He likes love. He needs it. In public, he wears a face. We make it hard to keep the face on. Butcher chuckled. We poke the bear. Huey muttered. Everyone keeps saying bear. Frank looked at Huey. Stop calling me that. Butcher laughed. See, he can learn. MM cut in. Firm. We do this with limits. We don't go in with explosives. We don't start a massacre. We get people out. We get footage. We leave. Butcher's jaw tightened. Fine. Frank looked at Butcher like he didn't believe him. Butcher stared back. I said fine. No one trusted it. Not fully. But it was what they had. The first offer came the next morning. Not to Frank. To Butcher. It came as a message delivered through a clean chain. No messy middlemen. No street talk. A location. A time. A promise. Butcher read it aloud. Voice playful. Eyes sharp. Victoria Newman, he said. She wants a little chat. MM's face hardened. No. Annie's eyes narrowed. She's poison? Butcher shrugged. So is Vought. We still drink from the tap when we have to. Huey swallowed. Newman, the smiling politician, the one who said the right things and somehow made the world worse anyway. Frank didn't react at first. He kept checking his gear. But then he said, "She wants the skull." Butcher's grin flickered. "She wants options. Same as everyone." Frank's eyes lifted. "If she offers you a deal, you will take it." Butcher's grin came back. "Maybe." MM stepped forward. "No, we don't cut deals with her." Butcher snapped, sudden and sharp. "We don't cut deals with anyone. We just die slowly, yeah? That your plan?" MM held his gaze. "My plan is to keep us human." Butcher's mouth curled. "Human doesn't win here." Frank's voice cut in, cold and even. "Human is the point." Butcher stared at Frank, eyes narrowed, like he hated that the line sounded good. Annie looked between them. "We can't split right now." Butcher lifted his hands. "I'm not splitting. I'm listening. Listening doesn't mean signing." Huey didn't like how comfortable Butcher looked with that idea. MM's voice dropped. "If you go, you don't go alone." Butcher's eyes flicked to Frank. "Oh, don't worry. Our mate here will keep me honest." Frank didn't answer. He didn't agree either. Homelander's offer came without paper. It came with a sound, a soft tap on a window at night. Frank was alone in a small apartment they were using for one more night. The curtains were shut. The lights were off. The street outside was quiet. Frank looked up. A shadow floated outside the glass. Homelander hovered there like a man standing on air. He smiled, gentle, like he was visiting a friend. Frank didn't move toward the window. Homelander's mouth moved anyway. The sound carried through the glass like it was nothing. "You hide in cute little holes," Homelander said. "I like that. It's brave." Frank's hand went to his pistol, not because it would help, but because it was habit. Homelander's eyes flicked down. He laughed softly. "Don't." Frank stayed still. Homelander tapped the window again. "Open it." Frank didn't. Homelander's smile stayed. "Okay." The glass didn't shatter. It didn't explode. It simply cracked in a perfect circle, like someone cut it with invisible hands. Then the cutout piece slid inward and fell to the floor with a small, neat sound. Homelander floated in, slow, careful, like he didn't want to dirty his boots. He landed on the carpet and looked around like it was a hotel room. He sniffed once. "This place smells like old socks." Frank's eyes stayed locked on him. "Why are you here?" Homelander's smile widened. "To talk." Frank didn't answer. Homelander stepped closer, hands open, friendly. "You're new. You're interesting. You're not one of mine. And you don't seem scared." Frank's voice was flat. "I'm not impressed." Homelander blinked, then smiled bigger, like that was the point. "See? That's what I like." He leaned in slightly, like sharing a secret. "People here act brave on camera. But in private? They shake, they beg. You don't." Frank's eyes didn't flinch. "If you want something, say it." Homelander's smile softened. "I want your name." Frank didn't move. "No." Homelander's eyes narrowed for half a second. Then the smile returned. "Everyone has a name." Frank's voice stayed steady. "Not for you." Homelander's face stayed pretty, but the air changed. The room felt smaller, like a storm pressed against the walls. Homelander's voice stayed sweet. "Here's the deal. You stop. You take off the mask. You become a hero." Frank stared. "I don't work for you." Homelander laughed. "You wouldn't work for me. Not like Noir does. Not like the others. You'd be special." He lifted a finger and traced the air near Frank's chest, not touching. A dark hero. A scary hero. A hero who hunts the bad guys so I don't have to get my hands dirty. Frank's jaw tightened. You already have blood on your hands. Homelander's smile didn't move. And nobody cares. He leaned closer. But you could make them care if you do it right. Frank didn't blink. You want control. Homelander's eyes sharpened. I want order. Frank's voice was quiet. You want worship. Homelander's smile vanished for a blink. Then it returned. Forced. You're smart, Homelander said. That's new. He stepped back and spread his arms. Think about it. You get resources. You get targets. You get to kill the people you hate and be loved for it. Frank's voice stayed hard. I don't kill for love. Homelander's eyes cooled. Everyone does something for something. Frank took a slow breath. I do it because someone has to. Homelander stared at him for a long second, then laughed, but it wasn't happy. You're going to get people killed, Homelander said. Frank answered, simple. You already are. Homelander's jaw tightened. The room hummed with quiet threat. Then Homelander smiled again, calm as a postcard. Okay, he said. No deal. He turned to leave, then stopped at the broken window. Oh, Homelander added casually, tell your little friends I said hi. Frank's eyes narrowed. Stay away from them. Homelander looked back, amused. Make me. He stepped out into the air like gravity was a joke. Before he flew away, he leaned back in. One more thing, Homelander said. When I find your name, I'm going to say it out loud. On camera. And I'm going to watch what that does to you. Then he was gone. And the night felt too quiet. Frank stood still for a beat. Then he moved fast. He packed. He erased traces. He left. Because staying in one place after that was how you died. The charity event was bright enough to hurt. Banners waved. Music played. People smiled. Cameras rolled like the world was safe. A Vought wellness center sat behind the stage, clean and pretty. The building looked like it hugged you from the outside. Huey stood in the crowd with a cap pulled low and a cheap phone in his hand. His stomach churned. He hated this part. The pretending. The standing among smiling strangers, while danger sat 10 feet away and wore a cape. Annie stood near the stage, in costume, because it was the only way she could get close without being shot on sight. Her face was calm, but Huey could see the anger behind her eyes. MM and Frenchie were in the service area, waiting by a side door. Kimiko was with them, hood up, muscles tight. Frank stayed farther back, near a maintenance alley, mask on, skull hidden under a dark jacket. He looked like a shadow among shadows. Huey had survivors with him. 3 of them. Not kids. Adults who could stand. Their faces were pale. Their hands shook. Huey leaned in and whispered, If you feel like you can't do it, we stop, okay? One woman swallowed hard. I can do it. Her voice sounded like glass. Huey nodded. Okay. A roar rose from the crowd. Homelander floated down from the sky like a perfect answer to a prayer. He landed on the stage, smiling wide. The crowd screamed like he was a rock star. Huey's skin crawled. Homelander waved. He laughed. He pointed at kids. He made them feel chosen. Then he held up his hands. Thank you, Homelander said, warm and smooth. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in heroes. Thank you for believing in America. The crowd cheered. Annie's jaw tightened. Homelander turned slightly and looked toward the wellness center behind him. We're here today, he said, to celebrate healing, to celebrate second chances, because Vought cares. I care. Huey felt bile rise in his throat. This was the mask. This was the lie. Huey looked down at his phone. He had it ready. Not on Vought's feed. Not on their platform. On a stream that went to dozens of places at once, set up by Frenchie and a few underground contacts Annie trusted. It was messy. It was not perfect, but it was real. Huey whispered into his mic, low. Now? Frenchie's voice crackled back in Huey's ear. Wait. 2 breaths. Huey took 2 breaths, shaking. Then the survivors stepped forward. They didn't climb the stage. That would get them shot. They moved toward the front barrier, close enough that the cameras would catch them. One man raised his hand and shouted, voice cracking, "That building is a cage!" Security moved fast, too fast. But Huey was already streaming. Annie's eyes widened. She turned toward the sound. Homelander's smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened, like a blade slid out of a sleeve. The woman beside Huey stepped forward, shaking, and lifted her shirt sleeve. Bruises showed. Needle marks. She spoke loud enough to be heard. They hurt us in there. They tied us up. They injected us. They said we were unstable. The crowd went quiet in pockets. Some people booed. Some people filmed. Security grabbed the man's arm. The man screamed, "We were in the basement! We heard them talking about shipments!" Homelander stepped forward, still smiling. "Hey," Homelander said, voice gentle, like he was talking to a scared kid. "Hey, it's okay. It's okay. You're safe." Huey's skin crawled harder because Homelander sounded sincere, or he sounded like he could pretend it perfectly. Homelander looked at the bruises like they offended him personally. "I'm so sorry you feel scared," Homelander said. Annie's fists clenched. Huey's heart pounded. Homelander lifted his hand, and the security eased, like they were waiting for his signal. Then Homelander spoke louder, to the crowd. "Sometimes," he said, "bad people try to spread lies. They want you to stop trusting heroes. They want you to feel afraid." He pointed slightly, not at the survivors, but toward the crowd. Like he was protecting them from something. "Don't let them," Homelander said, warm. "We will take care of them." The security started pulling the survivors away. Huey stepped in, panicked. "No!" A hand grabbed Huey's shoulder from behind. Frank. Frank didn't yank Huey back hard. He just pulled him half a step, like a warning. "Keep filming," Frank whispered. Huey swallowed. His hands shook, but he kept the camera steady. The woman cried out as security dragged her. "Please! Please!" Homelander's eyes flicked to the side fast. He saw the phone. He saw Huey's stream. He saw other phones rising like a wave. Homelander's smile stayed, but his eyes went cold. He leaned toward the barrier, not close enough to touch, but close enough that his voice could drop. "Stop," Homelander said softly. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The survivors froze. Huey felt his stomach drop through the floor. Homelander's gaze moved past them, scanning. Then his eyes landed on Frank. Even under the jacket, even in the alley edge, Homelander saw him. He smiled wider. "There you are," Homelander said, still into the mic, like this was part of the show. Huey's blood went cold. Homelander turned back to the crowd. "We've had some disruptions lately. A new extremist. A masked man who hurts people and runs away." Boos rose. Some cheers, too. Homelander lifted a hand again. "But don't worry, I'm here." Then he looked straight at Frank. The smile slipped for a second. Just a second. And in that second, people saw something behind the mask. Not hero. Owner. Homelander floated off the stage and drifted down toward the barrier, toward the crowd. Toward the phones. Security tried to clear space. People pushed back. Some screamed with excitement, some with fear. Annie moved. She stepped off the stage and walked fast, placing herself between Homelander and the survivors. "Homelander," Annie said, voice controlled. Let them go. Homelander looked at her like she was a fly that learned to talk. Annie, he said, smiling. Sweetheart, you're confused. Annie's hands glowed faintly. Don't do this. Homelander's eyes flicked to her hands, then back to her face. You're going to shine at me? Annie's jaw clenched. I'm going to protect them. Homelander leaned in close, still smiling for the cameras. You want to protect people? Be a good girl and get out of the way. Annie didn't move. Behind her, the survivors trembled. Huey kept filming, breath shaking. Frank didn't rush Homelander. He didn't aim a gun. He stayed still. But he stepped into better light. Not because it was safe, because it mattered. Homelander's eyes locked on him again. What's your name? Homelander asked, voice light, almost playful. Frank didn't answer. Homelander chuckled. Come on, give the people a name. They deserve that. Frank's voice was low, but it carried. They deserve the truth. Homelander's smile twitched. Annie's eyes widened a little, like she couldn't believe Frank was talking to him like that. Homelander looked at the phones. Dozens of them. Hundreds now. Everyone wanted the moment. Homelander inhaled slowly, then smiled again. All right, he said. Truth. He turned back to the crowd and raised his hands. You want truth? Homelander said. Here's truth. He pointed to the survivors. These people are sick, Homelander said. They're scared. They got involved with dangerous groups. They hurt themselves. And now they want attention. The woman screamed, No! Homelander's smile stayed. I'm trying to help them. People shouted. Arguments broke out. Some believed him. Some didn't. Huey's eyes stung. This was the problem. Even in a moment like this, people picked what they wanted. Frenchie's voice crackled in Huey's ear. Now. Huey blinked. Now what? Frenchie said. Upload. Huey's thumb hit the screen. At the same time, Annie lifted her hands and released a sharp burst of light, not at Homelander, but at the Vote camera rigs above the stage. The rigs sparked. Screens behind the stage went black. Vought's clean feed died. For a heartbeat, only the crowd's phones were recording. Only the messy, real angles. Only the truth nobody could fully edit. Homelander's head snapped toward the dead screens. His smile vanished. He looked angry. Really angry. He looked like the warehouse roof right before it tore. A man in the crowd shouted, What did you do? Homelander's eyes flashed. He lifted his hand and grabbed the man by the shirt. The man yelped, feet leaving the ground. Huey's blood turned to ice. Annie shouted, No! Frank moved, not toward Homelander's chest, toward the man. Frank stepped into the open, hands raised slightly, voice hard. Put him down. Homelander turned his head slowly, still holding the man like a bag. The crowd screamed. Phones shook. Homelander smiled again, but it was wrong. You're giving me orders? Frank didn't blink. I'm telling you what's right. Homelander laughed, sharp and small. Then, for the first time, his voice dropped low enough that it felt private, even in the crowd. You don't belong here, Homelander said. You don't get to change my world. Frank's voice stayed flat. It's not yours. Homelander's eyes narrowed. The man in Homelander's grip started crying. Huey couldn't breathe. Annie stepped closer, hands glowing, pleading with her eyes even if her mouth didn't plead. Homelander stared at all the phones, at all the faces, at all the love he needed. His jaw worked. Then he dropped the man. The man hit the ground and crawled away, sobbing. The crowd exhaled in a wave. And then Homelander did something else. He smiled wide. He spread his arms and spoke into the mic again. See? Homelander said, bright. I could have heard him. I didn't, because I'm a hero. Some people cheered. Some didn't. But the doubt was there now. Like a crack. Huey's phone buzzed. Upload complete. The staging call clip went out. The cage stills went out. The doctor names went out. Not everywhere. Not to everyone. But enough. Enough to start something. Homelander's eyes flicked to Huey's phone, like he could feel it. Then Homelander looked at Frank again and smiled like a promise. "This isn't over," Homelander said softly. Frank didn't answer. He didn't need to. MM's voice snapped in the comms. "Move! Now!" The team moved. Frenchie and Kimiko dragged the survivors through the service door. Huey followed, heart pounding. Annie backed out last, flashing light just enough to blind a security camera as it tried to reboot. Frank stayed one extra second. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the phones. He looked at Homelander. Then he turned and disappeared into the alley. Homelander didn't chase, not yet. He floated up, smile back in place, and waved to the crowd. But his eyes stayed locked on the alley like he was memorizing it, like he was choosing how to hurt them later. They didn't get a clean win. They got a messy one. That night, Votes networks called the clips deepfakes. They called the survivors actors. They called the whole thing a terror plot. But the problem for Vought was simple. There were too many angles, too many phones, too many people who had seen Homelander's hand on a man's shirt, too many people who had seen Annie blast the rigs and wondered why the rigs mattered so much. In the safe place they reached by dawn, MM watched the feeds roll by on a laptop with a grim face. "It's spreading," Huey whispered, shocked. Annie sat on the floor, knees up, shaking with anger and fear. "And they're going to punish someone for it?" Frenchie nodded, eyes dark. "Yes." Kimiko stared at the wall. Her fingers flexed, like she wanted to grab the world and squeeze. Butcher leaned against a counter, watching the chaos like it fed him. "Good," MM glared. "Don't." Butcher shrugged. "It's good. For once they're scrambling." Frank stood near the window, looking out at the gray morning. Huey walked up beside him, quiet. "You did it." Frank didn't look at him. "We did a piece." Huey swallowed. "Homelander." "He didn't kill anyone." Frank's voice was flat. "He wanted to." Annie's voice came from the floor, tight. "He's going to come after me." Mem said, "He's going to come after all of us." Butcher smiled. "Let him." Frank turned slightly. "He will come after the survivors first." Frenchie's face tightened. "We moved them." Frank's eyes stayed hard. "Move them again." MM sighed, exhausted. "We can't keep running forever." Frank's voice stayed calm. "Then stop hiding in the same kind of place." MM looked at him. "What does that mean?" Frank pointed at the laptop. "They fight with cameras, so we fight where cameras can't help." Butcher chuckled. "He's learning." Huey looked at Frank. "What now?" Frank's answer was simple. "Now we shut another cage." Butcher's eyes gleamed. "Now you're speaking my language." Frank looked at him. "No, I'm not." Butcher's grin faltered for half a second. Frank continued, voice steady. "I'm speaking mine." A few nights later, Frank stood alone on a rooftop. The city spread out under him. Lights, noise, people living under screens. He wore the mask. He kept the skull hidden under a jacket. Not because he was ashamed, because he understood the game now. Symbols travel faster than names, and names get people killed. A soft footstep came behind him. Huey. Huey held out the same kind of burner phone again, like it had become a tradition. Frank stared at it. Huey said, "Quiet. One button." Still. Frank took it and didn't crush it. Huey let out a small breath and leaned on the ledge, looking out. "You ever miss your home?" Huey asked. Frank didn't answer right away. He looked down at the street. A couple walked past a wall with graffiti on it. A skull symbol, sprayed in black. But under it, someone had written in shaky white paint. "Stop lying," Frank's jaw tightened. He didn't like being turned into a slogan, but he liked that the message was simple. Huey followed his gaze. "They think it's you." Frank's voice was low. "They don't know me." Huey swallowed. "Maybe that's good." Frank didn't disagree. Behind them, a screen on a far building played a VOD ad. Smiling faces, perfect teeth, safe lies. And under it, smaller, on the street level, a poster flapped in the wind. "Missing witness." Vought was already cleaning. Frank's eyes narrowed. Huey's voice shook slightly. "Are you staying?" Frank looked at Huey for a beat. Then he looked back at the city. "At the cages," Frank said. "At the trucks. At the people who can't fight back," he answered simply. "As long as they keep hurting people." Huey nodded, like he expected it, and also like it scared him anyway. Frank turned to leave. Huey called after him, "Quiet." "Frank." Frank paused. Huey didn't say a speech. He didn't say a big thank you. He just said, "Don't go alone." Frank didn't promise. But he didn't say no, either. He stepped off the roof and into the stairwell, moving like a shadow with a plan. Behind him, the city kept glowing. The lies kept playing. But now, in the cracks under the billboards, people were starting to look up at the screens and ask one small question. What if the heroes are the monsters? And somewhere below, on a wall no camera cared about, the skull stared back at the world. Not as a brand, as a warning.